Today I'd like to share with you how you can easily crush the Sicilian defense playing white with a solid yet relatively tricky opening variation. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're talking about this position. After white first move pawn e4, black responds pawn c5, we're getting the Sicilian defense. And now you play knight f3, which is the main move here. One of the probably most popular main response of black is pawn d6, which may lead to the dragon variation or the knight variation of the Sicilian defense played by Fischer, Kasparov, and almost everybody else. Therefore, most of your opponents will probably play that move. And then you respond with pawn c3, which is called delayed Alapin. And you'll be surprised to see how powerful this seemingly, simple move can be. Now, first of all, what's the point? Well, the point is pretty clear right now. You're going to play pawn d4 and establish these beautiful pawns in the center of the board. So that is the most obvious intent of the move pawn c3. But what is really surprising and what makes this opening really underrated is that there are so many tricks and pitfalls for black along the way that it is mind-boggling. That's why you probably would never think that this opening could be dangerous, could be aggressive for white, but it actually is. Just to give you, a taste of it, how would you play this if you're playing black? You may think about this for a second. Perhaps black would consider moves such as knight c6 or knight f6. Standard moves of the Sicilian defense, and generally speaking, all the chess tutorials tell you develop pieces in an opening, knights before bishops, right? But in this position, move knight c6 is almost a losing mistake. I mean, perhaps it's too early to say that black is completely losing after that, but after d4, the black's position is very challenging and it's quite close to being a losing position. Now, what's the point here? Well, let's say black will trade here, and white threatens to push here the pawn forward d5, attacking the knight, so the knight will have to retreat, and white will also gain the space control, making it harder for black to defend. Maybe the bishop can come out there to b5 in the future. So basically white gets just this super comfortable advantage and blacks will be in a big trouble. Now, black may try to play bishop g4 and say, hey, I don't want to defend, I want to put the pin over here, I'm putting pressure over here on d4, I'm doing good. And at first it may seem like white has to play some defensive move, but instead white pushes the pawn forward d5 anyway. Now, moving the knight backwards seems just like a very passive and bad option, so probably knight e5, moving the knight to the center of the board. Now, black definitely expects you to play bishop e2, defending the knight or something like that, but instead you just sacrifice your queen. Knight takes e5, and this is a winning combo. Black has to accept the sacrifice, bishop takes, but now bishop b5. Here's the key winning move. It turns out that the only way for black to cover their king is to give their queen back. And after that, you just keep collecting everything given to you. Bishop takes d7, king there, and you're already up a piece, so basically any move would win. But you can just keep taking everything. Knight takes, and king takes here, and the next move you'll capture on h8, and you'll be up a rook and a minor piece, so definitely winning. You can easily see how this variation turned out to be such a beast and completely demolished black within just a couple of moves, even though black played seemingly natural moves. Now let's dive a little deeper into the possible moves that black can use against you so that you know how to respond. Okay, so the first question that you may have is, after knight f3, black is now forced to respond pawn d6 because there's another move which is also quite popular, that is knight to c6. Does it mean that you have to get your hands dirty and study all this opening theory? No, we've got you covered. Instead of all that, you can shock your opponent by playing pawn b4, a very unknown, super strong gambit. I won countless games playing this, especially in Blitz, and I've got a video about that, so you may check this out later. Definitely a good opening weapon for white. Okay, so once we excluded that, let's get back to pawn d6, the main move. Now we play pawn c3, which is the delayed Alapin. Another question that some of you may have is why to play delayed Alapin if you can just play Alapin. By the way, the Alapin variation is when you play this pawn c3 move, preparing pawn d4 in various kinds of Sicilian positions, right? So normally, playing something with a delay should be worse than playing it on time, right? But not quite the case here. Let's just take a move back here. And what's the problem with the Alapin itself? Well, it's a possible opening choice, of course. But here black can challenge you in the center right away. They can attack this pawn on e4 either by playing pawn d5, quite strong, or by playing knight f6. And either way, black is attacking your pawn in the middle of the board and are getting a good game. Now, what is happening when you play knight f3, when you insert that in between move first? Knight f3 d6 and only then you play the move pawn c3. Well, it helps you to take away the two of the strongest responses of black against Alapin. Black will not want to play d5 anymore, because right on the previous move they played pawn d6, so it's kind of dumb to play d5 right now, losing a tempo. And if they go knight f6, which is something that they probably will play, trying to attack your pawn in the middle of the board, the really great solution you've got here is just to ignore it completely. And you play bishop e2, letting black capture the pawn, because if they're seduced by this pawn sacrifice, then there's queen a4, and you double attack the opponent's king and knight, thus winning the game immediately. So delayed Alapin helped you to get a very quick win. Alright, let's say they are careful, they're not taking your pawn, then what would they do then? Well, according to the statistics, the most played move by far is knight to c6. Again, looks like a completely natural, standard move that you would normally play in most of the chess openings out there. But in this position, once again, it's actually almost a losing mistake, which is quite funny and certainly not obvious. I mean, I'm a grandmaster, I definitely would not notice that knight c6 is such a bad mistake. You know, I know it right now after analyzing this opening a lot, but prior to that, I certainly wouldn't guess that knight c6 is such a bad mistake, but it actually is. Now, just a quick spoiler that for black it would be better to play some other move, not knight c6 in this position, and in that case they'll get a good, well, normal game here I should say, but the good thing for you here is that you didn't compromise your position anyway, you have no weaknesses, everything's fine, so if black play any other move, not knight c6, you just get a normal chess game, okay? And you'll still defend this pawn e4 in the future, you'll still try to push d4 in the future, again, you get a normal game of chess. But if they play knight c6, the most standard move, then you respond with pawn d4 anyway, and once again you let black capture this central pawn on e4, letting them to blunder a knight once again, because if they capture the pawn either right now or after a trade on d4, and let's say they take the pawn right there, then you play pawn d5, and now they have another wonderful opportunity to not mess around for too long. And if they move their knight anywhere, let's say knight e5 or any other square, there is still queen a4, still the same double attack, but again it's quite a bit of a hidden tactic, so your opponent can still easily overlook this. Many of them will. Now what if they don't? Let's take this move back. The only move which saves black is playing queen a5 check. They have this counter-attacking move which, yeah, at least down loses a piece for black. Then you still play knight c3, and after an exchange on c3, here black has a final opportunity to lose the game right away. If they decide to take this pawn on c3 with a check, it looks strong at first, but after bishop d2, you attack the queen, and then black's knight on c6 is still under the attack, therefore in the next move you'll capture one of the pieces, winning the game once again. It's quite fun that you have traps all over the place, like every step of the way black has a chance, quite a realistic chance to lose the game immediately. Now let's take this move back. Once again, let's say your opponent is experienced, he knows how to calculate variations, and he plays knight e5. Not a big deal. Then you trade here on e5 to break black's pawn structure, and then you just castle. And the good thing about this position is that you've got great attacking chances here, and a great chance to win the game early in the opening or like early middle game. Because the fact is, most of the black's pieces are underdeveloped, right? Their king is stuck in the middle of the board, and it'll take quite some time for black to finish their development and to castle. Also, your pawn from here, from d5, makes it harder for black to play e6 easily and to, you know, develop their bishop the way they would normally do in, you know, in an opening. Also, you've got a lot of open lines and diagonals for your pieces, like this diagonal is weak, but possibly can be used by you to attack. You've got the b file for your rook to attack black. You have a lot of attacking ideas here, while black is underdeveloped. So again, in a practical game, black is having a really hard time here. I'd say black is almost lost. Again, in a real practical game, extremely difficult to save this playing black. Right, so what's the most played move by black here? It's pawn g6, trying to fianchetto the bishop and then the castle. Now, in this case, there is a very key move for any kind of variations here. It's rook b1 that is, you know, worth to remember. What's the point? Well, you put your rook to a semi-open file, that's extremely active there, but in addition to that, you support the potential move bishop b5. So you can land your bishop over there, and it'll hit the king, and it can be a beginning of a really powerful attack. That's, you know, why rook b1 kind of kills two birds with one stone, even though I'm not sure why would you wish to do that, but anyway. Black plays bishop g7, and here, as soon as they're ready to castle, you want to stop that, right? Because you want to attack the king in the middle of the board. So white goes pawn d6, trying to open up the position. When the king is still in the center, you want to save it there, and you want to then attack it and win. Now, black cannot easily castle here, because first of all, it could take this pawn, but even stronger is just to play pawn d7, and the bishop is captured. So the next move, no matter what black does, you're going to win the bishop. So that's why that's not an easy solution for black. And if not that, they would probably take here on d6. Now you recapture with the queen. And what's great about this is that now your queen cuts the king off, and therefore it cannot castle anymore, because it cannot go across the controlled square. And basically, you're winning here, because white's threatening, for example, bishop b5, the same bishop b5 check, which would be almost a checkmate in this case. Just one of the threats of white. Let's say black goes queen d8, trying to bring their own queen closer and also get rid of your queen from d6. You still play bishop b5 check. Bishop d7 is the only way to cover, and now you keep punching with the move bishop to g5, deflecting the black's queen, and it just shows you overall how powerful your attack and how quick your attack is. Now the bishop attacks the queen. The queen cannot move away, because if it does, you're gonna play queen e7 checkmate yourself. What else can black do? Well, if they try capturing the bishop, you're gonna capture over here on d7, check to the king. It has to move to d8, and from here it's pretty clear that we're gonna win soon, one way or the other. Let's say bishop c6 check, king c8, and bishop takes b7 checkmate. And just one of the variations, but you could finish it off any way you want. It's just your attack is so strong. All right, let's take a couple moves back. Let me bring it back to this position. Okay, now here I've got a quick test for you, a little challenge. What if black goes pawn f6? How would you continue the white's attack here? Let's think about this and write it down in the comments below in case you can find a good continuation of the white's attack here. It's not a forced checkmate, but you can continue your attack and get a winning position. Hey, there's the final variation that you got to be aware of here when black goes knight f6, pretending like they're attacking your pawn, but it turns out to be not true because you can ignore this. We already know that capturing this pawn loses almost always due to queen a4 double attack. So black's going to go knight c6, pawn e4, that's still what we just analyzed previously. Pawn takes, knight e4, pawn d5. Now, in order to stop you from going queen a4 on the next move, black has to play a symmetric move themselves. You respond with knight c3, it's still all the same stuff. Knight e5, and we discussed it after knight takes. Black's going to recapture, doubling their pawns, which makes it harder for them to develop later on. But here black can decide to be tricky, and instead of recapturing the knight immediately, they may say, hey, I can play this in between move queen takes c3 check, and only then I'm going to take it with the queen so that my pawn structure is nice, and I'm also attacking this pawn on d5, looks cool. But it actually is not true, because you can just castle here, and even though the position looks slightly differently compared to the previous variation, overall it's all the same stuff. Black is underdeveloped still, their king is still in the middle of the board, you're gonna attack it, perhaps playing bishop b5 check, and yeah, you have a lot of open lines and diagonals, so basically it's all the same. Now, this position, in order to stop you from going bishop b5 check, which is coming, black will usually take here on d5, winning another pawn and also preventing you from playing bishop b5, because now the queen would be able to capture that. And guess what you're going to play here? The same move, rook to b1. Once again, with all the same purpose. Rook controls this semi-open file, and it still prepares bishop b5 on the next move, delivering check to the king. Now, in order to stop that move from coming, maybe they're going to go pawn a6. And they could play something else, but basically, anyway, because you're a hand in development, you have a lot of open lines and diagonals, your attack will always be extremely powerful. In this game, white played bishop f3, hitting the queen in this case, over there. Now the queen went to c5, and here in this position, white missed the winning shot, but there was a move, rook takes b7, and it completely destroys the black's position here after bishop takes. You're attacking this rook in the corner, and once it moves away somewhere, you're going to play queen a4 check. So we're still attacking the black's king with this move along this diagonal, this time with the queen, and it's still deadly. Now, what can black do? If they try to cover, of course, we're not going to trade queens. Instead, we're going to use this nice x-ray. It's kind of cool how we have a lot of the valuable pieces standing along this diagonal, but white wins because, this bishop double attacks the queen and the king, therefore you're going to win the queen. Now, what else can black do? Well, let's take a move back. The other option would be moving the king to d8, but it fails to bishop a5 check, which is almost a checkmate, because again your queen is controlling this diagonal, this bishop is attacking this diagonal, and this bishop is controlling here. So the black is actually under the massive fire, and they would have to give up their queen, and you'll continue your attack anyway, so that's a completely winning position for white. And it's quite cool how you can finish it off so quickly, before black had any chance to finalize their development. And you can just see how this opening remains to be both solid and highly aggressive and very tricky, because every step of the way black has a chance to lose it almost instantaneously. As many of you guys correctly stated in comments, one cannot become a really strong chess player just by following some opening tricks and opening theory. That's why if you want to elevate your chess, let me invite you to my free masterclass, The Best Way to Improve your Chess Instantly, where you can see the best training methods that I use for my most successful students to elevate their chess results, and you can adopt the same methods for your own games. Wishing you all the best, take care.